SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the fourth and final week of this course. In today's class, I will help you understand how individuals derive their identity from their community and how these identities in turn strengthen the community. I will begin with the discussion of David Harvey's iconic work, The Right to the City, and originally it was coined by Henry Lefebvre. The term was popularized by Harvey in 2008, and according to him, it is the collective representation of a human right. Harvey basically draws from Robert Park, an urban sociologist who argued that city is man's most successful attempt to remake the world he lives in more after his heart's desire. So hence, the kind of the city that human beings want for themselves are an integral part of who they are and what they want from their lives. Harvey defines the right to the city as more than a right of individual access to the resources that the city embodies, and it is a right to change ourselves by changing the city more after our heart's desire. The city is remodeled through various urban processes that need the power of collectivity. So what does it mean to have right to the city? According to Harvey, it is the ability to shape the process in which the cities are built and rebuilt. There is a connection, therefore, between urbanization and capitalism, since there is a need for surplus generation for the former process. However, the process of surplus generation is not always easy for the capitalist. Sometimes there is a dearth of labor, or their wages are too high, or the new labor has to be procured. New means of production and natural resources also have to be found. Investment in new technologies and forest markets become necessary in this case. Finally, the profit must be maintained. Failing to overcome these challenges basically creates or leads to the lack of surplus. Thus, urbanization in this case has to be done in such a manner that there is always a generation of the surplus. Moreover, the urbanization calls for a complete transformation of the lifestyle. People who are rich can afford a quality of city life. There is an illusion of choice, but it is actually only available to those with the purchasing power. In Harvey's words, under these conditions, ideals of urban identity, citizenship and belonging, already threatened by the spreading malaise of the neoliberal ethic, becomes much harder to sustain. As a result, there is very little chance of the residents coming together to claim their right to the city. As the city is destroyed and reconstructed, creative destruction, as Harvey calls it, takes place, and almost always the underprivileged sections of the society, in this case, are the ones who bear the brunt of it. A process called accumulation by dispossession, through which capitalists displace the poor people from their original lands, is what underlies urbanization, basically in a capitalist era, according to Harvey. The original landowners get almost nothing after being violently ousted from their own land. The fact that their possession is illegal in the eyes of the law does not help in their case. Harvey further explores what should be the demand of the collective if they want to find a way to claim back their rights? According to Harvey, they must ask for the democratic control over the production and the use of the surplus. The control of the surplus must not be in the private but the public hands, so that the people who have suffered as a result of the urbanization can have a say as to how it will proceed. Now that you know what is right to the city, let us see how different people identify with their community. According to Humon study in California, people identify as a city person, suburbanite, small town person, a country person, or rejected such identifications as meaningless, stigmatizing, or constraining, or a source of identity conflict. Modern urban society has brought with it a sense of rootlessness, so much so that it has been claimed by the scholars that people do not have or do not place identity. However, there are studies that refute this argument and say that people still feel a sense of attachment to their homes and draw identities from them. Through an example, we will discuss how Americans draw the community identity from the community that they belong to or relate to. Humon defines community identity as an interpretation of self that uses community, specifically a form of settlement, as a locus of attachment or an image for self-characterization. Community identity does not always correspond to one's place of residence. Urbanists, for example, no matter where they are currently stationed, claim to have sentimental ties to the cities. It is where they feel that they are the most at home. Moreover, they have interests that only cities can cater to. As a result, the urbanists feel a sense of we feeling towards other city people. Finally, a lot of urbanists claim to know better about cities and the way of life in them more than that of other places. The way people articulate their community identity gives an indication of how they want others to see them. Or let's see how a small town people, country people, and suburbanites do this. According to scholars, small town people like to portray themselves basically as friendly and amicable and greatly invested in family lives as compared to those of the cities. Small towns are seen, as Humon claims, as places of community, domesticity and tradition, whereas some small town people reject this identity since it is associated with provincialism, backwardness and narrow-mindedness. Country people mostly have weakness for rural life rather than the urban life. They believe in the simplicity of life and want to stay close to the nature. Their life revolves around agriculture mostly. Men here engage in outer activities in the natural setting, whereas women mostly like indoor activities such as crafting. Even though they think of themselves as friendly and open, they also see themselves as self-sufficient and practical. The suburbs are seen as an amalgamation of rural and urban lives without the negative aspects. Suburbanites see themselves as family people, well educated and well established. They claim to be more interested in home, family and community than the rest. While most people derive their identities from the community, there are some who find it redundant. One reason could be because of the stigmatized nature of certain community identities. Others see themselves as capable of being able to adjust with their immediate surroundings. Some people feel that the idea of having a particular community identity is very limiting. Finally, people reject this notion because of the conflict that the community identities in case of people with multiple community ties give rise to. It can be concluded that people here articulate a sense of belonging to a form of community based on varied ties of sentiments, interest, values and knowledge. They present an imaginary of self as a type of person appropriated from the community imaginary. No matter the stage in which the society is right now, community identities have continued to exist. Now I will discuss the role that the collective memories of community play in preserving the intangible heritage in form of historic buildings in a place. The study that I will refer to was done by Roberta Santoro on the project titled Mapping Intangible Culture in the Historic Core, a case study. It was based on the downtown region of the City of London in Ontario, Canada. The ethnographic project shows how people within a community talk in terms of buildings to show their attachment to a place. The project aimed to bring back the collective memories of the historic building to the forefront so that plans for the cultural future profile of the city could be made. When members of a community come together and relive the memories of a place, they can advocate for the better management of places that are integral to the city's civic pride. In order to identify such places, an UNESCO certified tool called the cultural mapping is used. It has been defined by Stewart as a process of collecting, recording, analyzing and synthesizing information in order to describe the cultural resources, networks, links and patterns of usage of a given community or a group. This tool is used to engage community for the purpose of identifying both tangible and the intangible historical aspects. These two aspects are, however, seen as interconnected, and cultural mapping ensures that these intangible aspects that are not present in the official narratives can come forward. As knowledge about the forgotten places are collected through memories and stories, it becomes a way for countering globalization. As people are asked to jog their memories, they regain the lost enthusiasm for their surroundings. In order to map stories, University of Waterloo digital platform named the Building Stories is being used. The platform accepts submission from community members in the form of multimedia content. The elderly can relive their memories by listening to each other with the help of this platform. It also helps to concretize their awareness of the different local historical places. This solidarity comes in handy when it is time to resist the developmental pressures. It can also act as a promotional agent for tourism. According to Santoro, cultural mapping is thus here used to inform the local governance in the context of conservation strategies, planning of eco and cultural tourism, and in order to empower the community through the creation of place embodied symbolic tool and related information. The buildings identified through this city are witness to a shared community culture. The project aims to make the community aware of its past so that it can build on its future on it. Moving forward, I will discuss how the identities of migrants, who are people who have moved from their original places of birth to a different place for various socio-economic and cultural reasons, undergo changes when they move to a new place. We will then see how the loyalty to the original community often makes things difficult for the migrants. Migrants are almost always attracted to large cities where the opportunities are great. In such city, life is structured around the characteristics such as the size, the density, the social heterogeneity, and they are identified by the sociologist Louis Wirth in 1938. After coming to the city, the migrants have to adopt to the urban way of life, which is highly regulated. Karanov has identified three main types of migrant behavior in this case. First, the migrant follows the rules of behavior and cultural norms specific to their new places of residence, identifying with the relevant community. Migrant identifies with a particular residential area but not with his or her community, keeping faithful to the social and the cultural nucleus of the mother community. The third is that the feeling alienated and unwilling to adapt to a new social and cultural environment, the migrant moves away. The first model, the migrant gradually gets assimilated to the city life. In the second case, there is a chance of conflict as the migrants do not want to accept the host city community as their own community. Hence, the migrants may adopt to the life of the city but live according to the norms of their original community. Vershinin and others have identified this problem in the Russian society. According to them, a city should be planned keeping in mind the following. The indigenous population life should be improved. The cultural identity of the city should be considered. The third is that there should be balance of the natural and the man-made elements. And the fourth one is the city's economy should be stable. Since the migrants owe their allegiance to the original community, it becomes difficult for all the residents of the city to have a shared identity. However, migrants often behave in this way due to the response they receive from the original inhabitants of the city. Hence, the author argues that globalization does not ensure a common identity or a shared cultural experience for individuals all over the world. There is thus a need to consider the concept of new individualism, since individualism has changed due to the factors of globalization, new information technology and multinational capitalism. Contrary to what we learnt about the situation in Russia, where migrants retain from identifying with the host community, I will now focus on a case from Istanbul undertaken by Anna Sekor. Sekor found that the migrant women of different ages and backgrounds position themselves in relation to Istanbul's urban community and their own right to the city and the informal and formal channels through which they claim to the urban space and resources are pursued. Istanbul is full of shanty towns called the Gisikondu in Turkish, which are full of migrants. The migrant women among with the other urban residents navigate the imagined boundaries of Istanbul through the constructed citizenship. According to the author, urban citizenship is understood as a set of relationships between the individual and the city that takes shape through the process of identity formation, social positioning in relation to the urban community and claims to urban rights. For migrant women, their citizenship of the urban spaces is determined by the factors of gender, age and their identity as migrants. T.H. Marshall defines citizenship as the civil, political and social rights and responsibilities that accompany membership in a community. In Istanbul, although the political rights are granted to women migrants, their engagement in the urban life remains questionable. If one goes by Lefebvre's notion of right to the city, which I have discussed already earlier in the class, the migrant woman should have the right to use urban facilities in the form of transportation, sanitation services and other spaces such as roads and public parks. However, the urban citizenship has always been constructed from a white cis man perspective where there is no place for the woman, let alone the migrant woman. Secor studies how processes of urban citizenship processes these include identity formation, social positioning and rights claims are enacted in the everyday life of Istanbul in the case of migrant women. Migrant women's understanding of what the urban culture is in Istanbul and their conviction that migrants are different from and marginalized in the main culture is formed through their dealings in the avenues of education and urban mobility. Most women saw education as advantageous and a necessary component for their participation in the urban life. They saw it as an advantage over women from villages or their previous generations who did not have access to education. However, not all women were able to gain from education prospects in the city. Although there are greater opportunities for education in the urban areas, it also opens too many avenues for which the women are not well prepared or well equipped. This study found that women in Istanbul move around a lot less than the men. Moreover, since they live in the Gisikondu or the migrant shanty towns, they do not consider themselves as urban. In spite of this, women seem to be free from their inhibitions in the new endorsement or the new environment. To sum it up, for migrant women in Istanbul, the issue of urban mobility revolved around the factors such as confidence, autonomy and personal comfort. As Secker puts it, access to and engagement with education and urban life as markers of Istanbulite identity appears as conduits for urbanizing women, channels through which migrant women find themselves forging new self-identities and engaging with the urban environment. Finally, we will look into the case of a Muslim neighborhood or paras of Kolkata, especially in the Park Circus area where the identity of the place almost always occurs through the arc of religious community membership and of their residents. Since here the population belongs to a different religion than that of the majority of the rest of the city, they are always otherized and it is believed that they are loyal to the country of Pakistan, a Muslim dominated country. The partition of India in 1947 a huge role to play in the ghettoization of the Muslim in separate residential sections of the city. In spite of the segregated nature of their existence, studies have shown how they find these exclusive neighborhoods much safer and more comfortable to reside in because of the familiarity. This, however, is no way means that the Muslims within these paras are homogeneous in nature. In fact, there are multiple identities drawn from the different contexts. The residents strive to maintain their distinctiveness from each other by limiting the interaction with those who are noticeably of different background. As Chatterjee puts it, relatively short distances in physical space translates into significantly large social differences among the inhabitants. Additionally, Muslim paras collectively maintain distance from the other neighborhood and vice versa, as there is a general suspicion that others tend to view them with the given the consumption of beef and dealing with leather, both of which are abhorred by the Hindus. Hence, the negative attitudes can on one hand stigmatize the community, but on the other hand can help them live a safeguard life within the boundaries of their exclusive neighborhoods. To conclude, in Chatterjee's works, the case of Park Circus Muslims is indicative of the reality of embedded identities derived from their particular biographies of membership to a post-colonial urban milieu where they have to continuously negotiate the demands of the community and the neoliberal modernity within a space that is heavily biased against their presence. I hope through the discussions on these cases, you have now got a very good idea or grasp about how communities derive their identity from the places and the vice versa. Thank you for listening and have a great day ahead.